Thank you all for coming today. I'm Congressman Dan Goldman from New York's 10th District, Lower Manhattan. I'm up here with Congressman Josh Gottheimer from New Jersey, Congresswoman Manning from North Carolina, Congressman Moskowitz from Florida, and the Jewish law student, head of the Jewish Law Students Association, who just gave us a tour with a couple of other students of the campus. What we saw was a massive encampment of tents and other students who seemed to be camped out. We have been speaking with Zach and others and understand that where Jewish students feel unsafe, insecure, and broadly harassed, to the point where the president had to cancel classes today and make them go virtual. That is unacceptable for a university. That is unacceptable for an academic institution. There's no question that everyone has a First Amendment right to speak out in this country, and that must be preserved. But a university and all universities have an obligation to maintain the safety and security of their students from all backgrounds. When Jewish students are forced to watch others burning Israeli flags, calling for bombing of Tel Aviv, calling for October 7th to happen over and over again, it creates an unacceptable degree of fear that cannot be tolerated. I was encouraged that the Columbia president issued some guidelines, additional security to ensure that there are no outside agitators who can get on campus, and that's a very important first step. I will leave it up to the university to decide whether or not a permanent encampment on campus in a space that has to be prepared for commencement is consistent with the guidelines and policies of the university. If it is not, it is certainly within their right to ask the students to leave that area. There is no right to a specific place to make a statement or use free speech. There are reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions under the First Amendment that also must be adhered to. I hope we will see further calm. I hope we will see rhetoric that returns to proper protest as opposed to threats of violence and harassment. And I hope that the university president, Shafiq, continues to crack down on any violations of the code of conduct, because that is what is at issue here. I was disheartened to learn from the students about all of their fears and their concerns, and especially hearing about how awful it is for Israeli students to watch Israeli flags burned. That is unacceptable at an academic institution of learning, and it must stop. We can have discourse, we can have disagreement, but we cannot have harassment or violence. And that is what the university's responsibility to enforce. So I thank you all for being here. I thank the students for taking us around campus, and I turn it over now to Congressman Gottheimer.
Thank you very much, Congressman Goldman. And Zach, thank you for taking us around with others. Honored to be here with Congresswoman Manning from North Carolina, and of course, Jared Goldman. I almost called you Jared Goldman.
There is a Jared Goldman.
Jared Moskowitz, who came to us from Florida this morning. I'm really grateful that you came today. It's very, very important. So thank you so much. And thank you to Columbia, Aziz and Pesach, everyone who observes. And good to be here in front of Hillel. I appreciate you taking the day. May 1st is National College Decision Day. Students and their families have a lot of factors to weigh. Here at Columbia, cost, academic programs, location. But for so many Jewish students and their parents across the country, including those lucky enough to be accepted to Columbia, add to that list whether they're a Jew and if they'll be safe or welcomed on campus. This month, the ADL released its annual report card, grading anti-Semitism on our nation's college campuses. The Ivy League doesn't even carry a 2.0 GPA now. 6 universities, including Columbia, received a D, and Harvard flunked out. Jewish students on each of these campuses are reporting distress. What goes on and right now with Jewish students. And even though with those failing grades that I just reported, the protests here at Columbia are a new low, and something that I never thought I would see with my own eyes. And that's something that we just talked about together. We saw it firsthand as we walked past the encampments on the university's main lawn, full of protesters spewing incendiary, anti-Semitic hate and vitriol. Many aren't even Columbia students, I've been told. Their campaign of intimidation is sickening and shocking, and as the White House said yesterday, echoes the rhetoric of Hamas terrorists. According to reports, the mass protesters shouted, quote, "We are Hamas, we're all Hamas." A group of thugs screamed, quote, "Never forget the 7th of October. That will happen not one more time, not 1,000 times more, but 10,000 times more." These protesters are reveling in the brutal murder and torture of thousands of Jews, including Americans, the deadliest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. They're carrying water for the barbaric terrorists who have blood on their hands. And that's just the beginning. According to Chabad at Columbia, protesters have directly targeted and verbally harassed Jewish students. They've said things like, quote, "Go back to Europe. All you do is colonize. And stop killing." The anti-Semitism is acute and pervasive. So much so that Columbia's own rabbi here at Chabad recommended that Jewish students stay away from campus for their own safety. Well, we are all standing here today as 4 Jewish members of Congress to make one thing clear. Jewish students are welcome here at Columbia. And while the leadership of Columbia may be failing you, we will not. We will do everything in our power to keep you safe and do everything in Washington we can to make sure that you feel welcome at this university or any university across the United States of America. And Columbia University, if they don't follow through, will pay the price. Just last week, the president and senior administrators testified before the House, assuring lawmakers that they would stand against anti-Semitism, saying anti-Semitism is antithetical to Columbia's mission, goals, values, and teaching. It's got no place on our campus. Really? A week later, toothless condemnations from administrators aren't going to stop the anarchy we're seeing. The only way to do it is with deeds, not words. This campus. Let me be crystal clear, as Dan said. The First Amendment guarantees freedom of speech and assembly, but not the freedom to harass and intimidate students for being Jewish or for being any religion. No Jewish student should have to worry that wearing a kippah on campus will make him a target, nor a Muslim student with her hijab or a Christian student with a cross. Students should be challenged academically, but they shouldn't have to worry about whether they're safe to leave their dorm. The last thing that should be on a parent's mind is whether or not their child will be harassed. Colleges have a legal obligation under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act to provide students, including Jews and Muslims, a school environment free from discrimination and harassment based on race, color, or national origin. Yet, just feet from here, Jewish students are being verbally and even physically assaulted. Mass protesters are cheering on and actively calling for the genocide of Jews. Imagine trying to study for finals at Columbia, where literally right outside the library, people are calling for your death. To the administrators at Columbia and beyond, here are our demands. Stop the double talk and start acting now. Discipline harassers, restore civility on this campus, encourage peaceful, constructive dialogue. We live in the greatest country the world has ever known. When we work together across all lines, there's nothing that can stop us. That's the key, and I call for Columbia to step up to the challenge. Stay united against hate. I know we can do it, and that our best days will always be ahead. Again, Aziz and Pesach, thank you, and God bless you. Now, Kathy Manning.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Kathy Manning. I represent the 6th District in North Carolina, and I co-chair the House Bipartisan Task Force to combat anti-Semitism, and clearly we have a lot of work to do. Just last week, the president and board chairs of Columbia University testified before a committee I sit on in the U.S. Congress, and they acknowledged the explosion of anti-Semitism at Columbia, and they committed to enforce new rules on protest to keep Jewish students safe. Sadly, since that hearing, the protests have become more extreme, more hostile, more threatening, with virulently anti-Semitic chants. Jewish students who are trying to study and get to class are targeted, harassed, and intimidated. Its rules. While free speech and the right to protest are an important part of this university's history, those rights must be exercised in accordance with the rules the school has established in order to prioritize the safety of students and faculty. Students who violate the rules must be held accountable in accordance with those rules, including removal, suspension, and expulsion when necessary if the rules are violated. Outside agitators who sneak onto campus must be removed and prevented from returning or harassing students outside the campus who are trying to get into campus. I have talked with Jewish students who feel threatened, isolated, discriminated against. Some have even been told to go home for their own safety. This is unacceptable. It cannot be the answer. Columbia must do more to keep Jewish students safe and to re-establish an atmosphere in which all students can learn, study, and participate safely in campus life. Columbia must also move forward with its promised efforts to teach its students and its faculty about the nature and history and dangers of anti-Semitism. It must ensure that Columbia professors are not encouraging and spreading anti-Semitism. I am deeply disturbed that these hostile and threatening protests are being implemented on college campuses across the country. I call on the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Justice to work with the White House to ensure that all universities take steps necessary to keep Jewish students and faculty safe. I also call on Congress to enact legislation to implement the steps outlined in the U.S. national strategy to counter anti-Semitism, to address the scourge of anti-Semitism, which is a threat to the foundations of our democracy. I have just recently filed a bill to do just that. My colleagues have all signed on it, and I urge the Speaker of the House to bring this bill to the floor for a vote. Thank you. Happy Passover.
Excellent. Jared Moskowitz from Florida's 23rd District. I want to thank my colleagues. I want to say that I agree with what they said, and I want to thank the students for inviting us here today and for Columbia University staff for walking us around. You know, I shouldn't be here. Tonight is the first round the table as a family. It's when you get to see really your extended family. I got two young kids. I got a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. I've been away for the last 10 days. I was looking forward to have dinner with them tonight. But instead, I wanted to be here because I wanted the Jewish students at Columbia to know we hear them, we see them, and collectively, not just the folks here, but on a bipartisan basis, we and Congress are going to do something about it. To the President of Columbia, if you want to know what the right thing to do is, I can tell you what the wrong thing to do is. Ask the presidents of UPenn and Harvard. Because we've seen this show before. This is the latest stage of that. You know, I talk to Jewish parents who are worried about their kids here. I have a number of them that are in my district. And there's one theme that keeps coming up over and over again, which is the double standard. They know, and you know, deep down, if this was any minority group, this wouldn't be happening. It wouldn't have gotten this far. But because it's Jews, we fall into this weird category. Oh, we're not protected. That's why anti-Semitism is on the rise. That's what the failures were in committee with those presidents. And that's the failure that's happening here today. You know, the group on campus now has demands. They're not going to leave captive and the school captive until their demands are met. I wonder where they've learned that behavior. The university must not give in to that sort of demands. I hope that we can figure out the difference between free speech and unacceptable anti-Semitism. We in Congress will do everything we can on a bipartisan basis to make sure that we're not just protecting the Jewish students here and their families, but we're doing that around the country. I want to thank all my colleagues for inviting me here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Excellent.
Thank you very much. We'll open up to a few questions.